Very nice to be here with you guys. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. We're very lucky to have two amazing investors with us today, and they're going to share their insights on what deep tech is and how we do things maybe a bit differently. My name has been introduced as Raphael. I'll be the moderator. Of course, those are the people that are going to talk to you. I'm just barely here to make sure that we have a good flow conversation. Jane, do you want to kick it off and introduce yourself a bit more?
Yeah, so I'm Jane Walerud from Sweden. I'm a serial entrepreneur in telecom infrastructure, TCP optimization, and such. It's been gone well, and since 2002, I've been investing in various rather techy ventures from Sweden mostly, and been CEO a couple more times. Nowadays, we focus as a family office. This has gone quite well. The three of us are all three successful entrepreneurs in tech, and we invest time and money, time about half time in money, around about €1 million into very few startups because we actually work operatively. It's been 19 years now, 18, 19 years. It's been fun. And it's
very good.
Deep tech, and climate change, biodiversity, something like that. That's what we focus on.
We'll go back to that for sure. Inka.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Inka Mero. I'm the founder and managing partner of Voima Ventures. We're the first Nordic deep tech fund purely focusing into science-originated startups. We manage two funds, a spin-off portfolio from VTT, the National Technology Research Center of Finland, who is also the anchor investor of our fund number 2. The new fund is 40 million euros. Our focus is pre-seed, seed stage, deep tech, but also Series A and B rounds, so we're multi-ticket. We also do across all industries, so anything from carbon neutral construction materials to liquid biopsy diagnostics, but we don't do preclinical pharma, so we don't invest into drug development. My background is 25 years in telecoms, mobile. I've been a CEO in multiple startups, full-time investor the last 12 years. So great to be here.
Excellent. Thank you both. We have a lot to talk about, obviously, around deep tech. But one of the things that most people, want to know is how do you actually define deep tech? And of course, everybody's got their own definition. So, Inka, since you were just last talking, what's your definition of deep tech?
So typically these are a university or research institution originated companies which have the strong roots in science, core research, and then later in applied research. Deep tech companies tend to have a really strong IP portfolio and they continue patenting even after the company has been founded. So the IP is a strong asset base for deep tech players. I would also say that they tend to have a profound impact on the industry if they succeed. So they could completely renew the energy industry or food chain and so forth. So these fundamental technologies which we need in order to solve the big global problems of humankind.
Great. Jane?
Adding to Inka's good definition there, I would say there is a technology focus. It's often coming from research, so that there is a technology focus. And from there, people will realize what markets they can actually change. And generally, the key people are scientists. There are also business people involved, but they are scientists to begin with.
That's a very good point that we'll piggyback on to as well later on, right? Since we're on the definition level, I obviously we all very keen on understanding the variation that you could see in the market. And one of them is geographically, right? And so we briefly spoke about this before, Jane. Do you want to give us your take on, deep tech in the Nordics, really? And what you see there?
I can do this because I'm going, oh my God, we're doing terribly in Sweden, right? Compared to what I'm seeing in these Finnish startups I've been talking to, and the Baltic startups I've been talking to, boy, you guys far ahead of us. It's amazing. We do have deep tech startups. We are starting to focus on them, but the main incubators are only really starting to let deep tech in last year, something like that.
New territory.
Kind of on my own, and to actually say, oh boy, an hour's flight away, there is a living, blooming ecosystem in deep tech. Lovely to see.
Very good. Do you want to, just speaking on that for a second, then Inka, you'll definitely give your view on this, but we talk about university and we talk about researchers. We clearly are two things that are sort of conjoined, but not necessarily working together. Talking about collaboration, Jane, do you actually see collaboration happening between various different countries in the Nordics on that particular angle? That, you know, classic education, also research institution talking to one another. Is that something you see or not really?
Not really. The startups we've started with, that we've joined, do not have, they're out of one researcher's brain, and that researcher has been in one university. So for instance, Econo is machine learning for IoT, connecting things smart. They come from Borås University, 7 years of research there, and then a bunch of successful serial deep tech founders found them and brought them on. So they have business people as well as the scientists. And that's all from Borås, right? And they found him by being a kind of a scout at places like this, or a coach, and said, oh, here's something that can actually be. No, even the ones that really are obvious, like forestry, no, they're all from one place. It's really too bad. All this Erasmus stuff, all this Eureka stuff doesn't happen.
Not at that level anyway. Understood. No. Inka, do you want to give us your views on the Nordics or your region, particularly on the maturity level?
So yeah, we do have a big amount of data companies in the Nordics, and it's all the result of basically high intensity of engineers, high amount of patenting across certain core industries. In Finland particularly, the telecom industry has paved the way, as has also the pulp and paper industry. So there are a lot of new materials and so forth, but growingly life sciences, we see a huge amount of companies in AR, VR, which actually originates from our strong photonics and optics research base. Having said this, I think the Nordic deep tech ecosystem isn't really united yet, like the entrepreneurial, let's say, digital ecosystem is. So many of these science-originated companies, they lack commercial skills, growth, entrepreneurship, like this clock speed that other, let's say, more digital and more maybe faster to move companies have. Mm-hmm. Also, in capital-wise, I think we have a handicap globally from the venture capital asset class. In Europe, basically, we have around 20 to 30% of the VC money going to deep tech. In China and US, it's around 40 to 50%. In the Nordics, it's in the ballpark of 15 to 25. So we still have this lack of capital, which this really successful deep tech unicorns would require. So I think we're in the early phase of the ecosystem still.
Jen, you are reacting to this? Is that?
I would love to see 25% of the investment capital going into deep tech. I don't know the numbers, but it seems way off and way high for me in Sweden.
Well, you've been a trailblazer, so hopefully they'll follow your lead and we'll get to have that number very soon.
Yep.
All right, moving on from the definition to the real world, we already got into this a little bit. So we talked a bit about university, right? Partnership, particularly. What about corporates? I think there's a lot of questions around the corporation participating in this, leading the way into research and development, the type of investment, also maybe tackling a little bit the question around the deal flow. Who do you want to take that first?
So I would be more than happy to. I think if you look at our portfolio companies, many of our listeners have probably heard of Solar Foods, which is a kind of a novel protein generated by CO2 feeding to bacteria in this protein brewery, or Dispelix, which develops waveguides for AR industry. So most of our portfolio companies actually have corporate investors through their venture arms. And I don't think necessarily this corporate money is always needed. It's often actually that the corporates want to invest in order to pave their way in terms of having access to early stage innovation. However, the corporates tend to understand the disruption better than the traditional investors. So if like energy, it's actually big energy companies who are driving now a lot of the investments and innovation. And it's not just money, it's mainly the pilots and commercialization projects that they do with startups. Having said this, you need to know what to do with the corporates. You can't basically be hugged to death by big gorillas. So there is this dilemma, but we have a kind of a in our investment thesis, we actually believe that all of the deep tech companies actually have to have ecosystem partners and big players in order to be successful. Very rarely deep tech companies can bypass a traditional player like in digital platform economy.
I would agree for sure. Jane?
Right. So in Graphmatech, we were first money in together with ABB Ventures. Okay. So it's solving industrial problems with graphene. We're the world's largest purchaser of bulk graphene already, and we're small. It is good. Okay. But the other corporates who we talk to, the ones who are in the same industry, say Schneider Electric and Hager and the others, they really want to know that ABB will not know anything about the projects we're doing with them. So you have to keep them at arm's length and make sure it's the venture arm, but also make sure they don't get information, which makes things a little bit difficult, because the reason they're buying in is because they want information to a great extent. So that is something that is, so far ABB has been extraordinarily well behaved, no problem whatsoever, but we do have to convince the other players in the same industry of that. Another one that's kind of interesting is we've just invested in a startup in a big industry, and a big industry that doesn't see a lot of innovation. And that industry, those are the big players there, it's an oligopoly. They're actually giving grant money to the startup in order to stake them so they actually happen. I think that's actually kind of interesting. They actually are giving money away because they need the innovation.
So, we have, 3M is investor in 2 of our portfolio companies. We brought in H&M to Infinited Fiber. They basically create this new kind of a cotton comparable fiber from fashion waste. We've also have Fortum in few of our portfolio companies and so forth, and even Huawei. And, we've had a very good collaboration. The key question, I think, really when the corporate investor would join along is like, what is really the exit process? And are there any exclusivities and such? And what we always kind of emphasize for our portfolio companies, that no exclusivities, it's really business collaboration based, mutual win-win, and then in a way, if that works, you kind of might have give a ticket to for their big player to invest as well.
There's things going on with the Ministry of Energy in Sweden. Now remember, we're just not. Okay, but they did give around the equivalent now of 10 million euros to a solar energy company I was invested in called Midsummer. They're now listed. And that was all grants, loans and grants, and just trying to keep them alive, and they did survive the whole Chinese dumping of the solar cell industry. So pretty impressive. They did that, and it's really thanks to the energy industry. Thank
you. It's a very, so one thing that I definitely pick on what you just said, and I think that's one of the first lessons of our panel is basically, if you want to be getting in bed with a corporate, you need to set the right agenda first and make sure the expectation is set correctly on both sides, because we all know that a startup versus a corporate have very different time to market or life scale, right? They have a different agenda. The second thing, Inka, you mentioned, which I think is extremely important, because I got my share of bad stories on that front, is exclusivity and patent and IP, right? Who owns what in there? Because we've seen, the number of corporates that just acquired company, and there's all kind of war stories there. And last but not least, indeed, what you mentioned, Jane, is if you happen to have a great support from government agencies that can put a significant ticket, it sort of validates and equalize a bit the corporate weight towards the startups. So I think it's a good lesson there. Good, moving on. And I'm conscious of time because we have until basically another 5 minutes. And I think we got more to talk about in just 5 minutes. I'm going to sweep back a little bit and we talked about the time to market roughly. Just a quick indication in 1 or 2 words on your experience, time to market of a deep tech startup. Yeah, it's a key question, isn't it?
It's a huge question. Yeah. Many of these companies develop fundamental technologies, new materials, sensing technologies, imaging, some sort of which could be deployed in multiple industries. And the big challenge is like, where do you go? And maybe my advice is just, go where your time to market is the fastest. So you can really learn as a team and get commercial traction. That really grows your credibility as well and gives you more chances to raise funding, and then kind of to get to other maybe domains as well. That would be my quick response.
So it takes a while. That's one of the reasons we've decided not to have a fund ourselves, is because deep tech startups take a while before they actually start to be worth quite a bit, and then they're worth lots. So for instance, my daughter's company, Volumental, does 3D scanning of feet and recommends shoes that will actually fit. Okay, they started 8 years ago. They now own the footwear niche, and they've been growing now solidly for 5 years, really solidly. They launched after three and a half years. Okay, so and now is when the value is starting to pop. Okay, so it would be horrible if I had an 8-year fund, right? Because then I'd have to sell now. And now is when the value is actually happening. Now is when they're scaling from 100 or 50 to 200 employees, right? It's now the value is happening.
What you're saying is basically this is not a VC territory. It's more on a private equity scale that we're looking into deep tech investments. But nonetheless, there's
even Crouan that I invested in, I was first money in. It's been 15 years and they're still not listed, right?
Okay. We got 2 minutes left. Really, that was too quick. Okay.
Deep tech for a reason, or tough tech for a reason. It takes a long time.
It takes a long time and a lot of dedication. Right. So since we have only to close, unfortunately, we were a little bit late. We produced that before. I think what I'd love you to leave the audience with is your top 3 lessons. So, Inka, do you want to kick it off? Top 3 lessons of what you know?
So it's not enough to have world's leading technology or science. You basically need a strong entrepreneurial skills and growth ambition. Second one is that go where your time to market is the fastest. So you will learn and maximize those learnings. Be agile. And third one, solve a big global problem. It's deep tech. So solve a big problem.
Be bold, indeed. Jane?
My first one is this is an ultra marathon. It's going to be the next 15 years of your life at least, right? So make sure you pick who you work with. Pick your first investors. Pick your business partners, because if they're irritating now, it's nothing compared to what they'll be in 5 years, okay? The next one is focus. It's really easy when you have a good technology to think that, well, this fits here and here and here. And so we'll try all 3. That's fatal. Okay, you have to focus where you solve something that the customer thinks is important and really hurts. You have to focus. Put the other things in a someday maybe folder and dream about them once every 6 months, but not more than that. Okay. And the third one is often you will have great value, add great value to your customers. Do not price on what costs you have plus some kind of a margin. Price on the value you provide. Generally, you want give the customer about 60 or 70% of it. Usually you end up at the end of a negotiation, but you're going to keep 30% of the total value yourself, okay? Try it.
Fantastic. Listen, guys, if you haven't understood it yet, if you don't have a company that is bold, ambitious and focused, then don't contact those ladies. They won't listen to you. But otherwise, please do, because I think you'll be in very good hands. Jane, Inka, thank you so much for those valuable lessons. I think it's been a wrapped up, very condensed conversation. We could have talked a lot more, but I think it was still useful. So again, thank you for your time, and hopefully everybody enjoyed that particularly good lessons. And we'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.